Are hate crimes how we stop being the punch bag? As you can see from the screen, ME and our community is the punch bag, and the person hitting it are some in the medical profession. I've been an advocate for 10 years this July, and I've done all sorts of legal stuff, looked into a legal fund, what types of cases should we be bringing, class action, all the rest of it. But I've never actually considered hate crimes before. And I have to say thank you to the Scotland hate crime bill that's been brought in yesterday, because I hadn't been thinking about this at all until people started talking about it. Obviously, I know that disability is a protected characteristic, but it's hard to know where the bar is, because we don't live in a perfect world. We know that not everyone is going to be nice and polite, and there's going to be a lot of misunderstandings about our disease. So when does it cross over from being ignorant to abusive? Abusive to criminal? So that's what this video is about. And I've taken some screenshots from the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK. Although I've said the Scotland bill was introduced yesterday, there has been one UK-wide for quite a few years, but the Scotland one goes further, which is why there's all the furore about it. But that doesn't mean that we aren't able to log disability hate crimes where ME-CFS is concerned, and that's what this video is about. So this is a screenshot from the CPS website, and it's their definition of it. So hate crime: the law recognises 5 types of hate crime on the basis of race, religion, disability, sexual orientation or transgender identity. Any crime can be prosecuted as a hate crime if the offender has either demonstrated hostility based on race, religion, disability, sexual orientation or transgender identity, or been motivated by hostility based on the same things. Someone can be a victim of more than one type of hate crime. So these crimes are covered by legislation. The police and CPS have agreed the following definition for identifying and flagging hate crimes: any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based on a person's disability or perceived disability. So there is no legal definition of hostility, a bit like there's no official definition of fatigue. It's just an overarching term that everybody uses, lots of different meanings. So what the CPS has said is, so we use the everyday understanding of the word, which includes ill will, spite, contempt, prejudice, unfriendliness, antagonism, resentment and dislike. Now, I've seen an awful lot of tweets over the past 10 years that would meet that legal definition or non-legal definition of the word hostility. I don't know about you, but I've seen an awful lot of spiteful, contemptuous, and very unfriendly tweets. And then obviously you've got the in-person conferences where we're basically slagged off to conference members. False sickness beliefs, they're not trying hard enough, they're malingerers, etc., etc. Okay, quite a bit of this website is interesting, so I'm going to stick the link on the YouTube post and on the other socials if I remember to, so apologies. If not, just Google CPS and hate crime. So hate crimes often have a disproportionate impact on the victim because they're being targeted for a personal characteristic. We recognise that hate crime not only impacts the individual victim but also the wider community. Yep. Hate incidents as one-offs or a related series of events can send reverberations through communities just as they reinforce established patterns of prejudice and discrimination. Well, there's definitely a pattern, isn't there? We can predict when there's going to be pushback in the press. We know when there's going to be pushback in the BMJ. We know when there's going to be pushback on Twitter because there is a pattern. This is why it's so important for hate crime to be prosecuted effectively. When presented with cases that involve disabled people, we will be aware that Disability hate crime and other crimes against disabled people may be underpinned by disableism or prejudice against disabled people. The stereotype-based belief that disabled people as a group are somehow inherently vulnerable, weak, and easy targets, is an attitude that motivates some crimes against disabled people. The prejudice, discrimination, and social exclusion experienced by many disabled people is not the inevitable result of their impairments or medical conditions, but rather stems from specific barriers they experience on a daily basis. This is known as the social model of disability. So stigma, gaslighting, we naturally exclude ourselves because we think that other people won't understand it, etc. So, when deciding whether it is in the public interest to prosecute disability hate crime or crimes against disabled people, our prosecutors must have regard to the Code for Crown Prosecutors. The Code states that where the offence was motivated by any form of discrimination, including the victim's disability, or whether the suspect demonstrated hostility towards the victim based on disability, the presence of any such motivation or hostility will mean that it's more likely that prosecution is required. Okay, so this is more specific info. It's important to make a distinction between a disability hate crime and a crime committed against a disabled person because of his or her perceived disability. A disability hate crime is any crime committed in any of the circumstances explained in the previous section. Some crimes are committed because the offender perceives the disabled person to be vulnerable and not because the offender dislikes or hates the person or disabled people. Our overriding aim is to protect disabled persons when they are targeted, even if the offence does not meet the legal definition of disability hate crime. We will therefore put before the court any evidence that a disabled person is targeted for this reason, so that the sentence reflects the gravity of such offending. In this policy, we define crimes against disabled people as any crime in which disability is a factor, including the impact on the victim and where the perpetrator's perception that the victim was disabled was a determining factor in his or her decision to offend against the specific victim. We define disability as any physical or mental impairment, which is the definition used in the Sentencing Act. This definition fully incorporates the definition of disability for the purposes of the Equality Act 2010. ME/CFS is included within the Equality Act 2010. This does apply to us. So any of you that are watching this thinking, well, I don't consider myself disabled, according to the Equality Act, you are disabled. Okay, so this is the important bit. I've put a lightning bolt next to it so that I don't forget to mention it. So one of the examples of types of crimes committed against disabled people are criminal assault, abuse or neglect of a disabled person where there is an existing relationship or, this is the bit, an expectation of trust. For example, where the perpetrator is a paid carer, family member, friend, support worker or volunteer. I would add medical professional to that, because we trust them that they know what they're talking about, they have our best interests at heart, and they do first do no harm. So I would add medical professionals within that. However, I have asked for legal advice. I haven't heard back from the people yet, but I will update this if I hear anything back. Okay, I said the other day that there would have been overlaps between the hate crime bill and the online safety bill, which is new in the UK. But the CPS website includes internet and social media anyway. And it says on here, I'll just move myself out of the way so you can read it. Hate crime can be perpetrated online or offline, or there can be a pattern of behaviour that includes both. The internet and social media in particular have provided new platforms for offending behaviour, and our revised guidance on the prosecution of cases involving social media provides more detail. That's worth a read. I had a read earlier. Won't be including that in this though. In approaching online hate crime, we will recognise that modern communications technology provides opportunities for hate crime. Understand internet and social media platforms as well as their community standards for policies for taking down material. Be familiar with the relevant law and referral systems. Be alert to the need to identify originators as well as amplifiers or disseminators. That's key with our abusers, because one person tends to tweet it and then the same people, it's a ripple effect, always the same people that are amplifying the message. Very important within our community. Prosecute complaints of hate crime online with the same robust and proactive approach used with offline offending, whilst recognising that children may not appreciate the potential harm and seriousness of their communications. It's not usually children that we have issues with. Consider the potential impact on a targeted individual or community. Treat online complaints as seriously as offline complaints and encourage all to be reported to the police. As with all hate crime offences, the police will be required to seek a charging decision from us. So now I've shown you all that, I think we kind of have to work out a bar for ourselves. We can't expect a perfect world, a utopia of acceptance of ME online or offline. Human nature, human behaviour does not work like that. However, when what I wrote to these legal advisors earlier was, I needed clarification on what our bar would be. And what I mean by that is, some people, I don't, some people call ME controversial. Some people say that there is no, no agreed thing about what ME/CFS is. I would say because of the MEICC, there is a scientific consensus. That consensus says it's not psych. That consensus says that we should be taken seriously. Enough is known about our disease for people that go against that to have the fallback of, well, nobody knows what ME is. I can say what I like. It's like, actually, if you're saying something that is completely against what is known about this disease and it causes emotional upset, in my mind, that should be a hate crime, because the ripple effect of that is family and friends and acquaintances and businesses, employers see the nonsense that's spouted by some of these people, and the stigma and the gaslighting increases. So there is a ripple effect, which is, I agree with the CPS when they say it doesn't just affect one individual, it affects the whole community. So what I would say is, the next time that either you face nasty abuse from an individual, online or in real life, please consider reporting it to the police. Because as the CPS put on their own website, we are encouraging everybody to report this. It's up to them to decide whether to take it further. But if they don't know about it, they can't do anything about it, can they? Also, the next time there is a conference and we've seen footage or somebody said that XYZ was said and they found it really offensive, you, me, we are allowed to report it. As the CPS said, and this is particularly in Scotland, their hate crime bill says, even if it's just something you've heard about and you weren't there in that moment, you can report that as a hate crime. Now, as much as I've got my misgivings about the Scottish hate crime bill, because it just seems too broad, police are not going to be able to police it. However, I would say that our community does not log hate crimes enough. When you consider just how many times we're abused, we get from individuals, whether they're medics or Joe Blog on the street, who just happens to be on Twitter or Facebook. We need to start thinking, okay, if I was one of the other protected characteristics, would I have logged that as a hate crime? If you're sat at home crying your eyes out and they've made you feel like you're the lowest of the low, not worth bothering with, and you know that that's wrong, why would you not report that as a hate crime? I've read you the definitions now. It's up to you to make your own judgment. But I, for one, now, in future, because I know that I don't physically have to be the target, or I don't have to be in that room, I will be reporting hate crimes. It's up to the police in the UK, the England, Wales, Northern Ireland, whether they act on it. Police in Scotland have to investigate now. That's why there's such a big furore about it. Have to investigate every single reported hate crime. It's not so. Not everything is reported, but allow the police and the CPS to make that judgment. I do think that a heck of a lot of the stuff that is thrown at us are hate crimes. I've said for many years that a lot of the stuff that comes out of psychologists is to stir up prejudice and hate for us as malingerers. So that's in the definition that the CPS provided, to create prejudice or as a result of prejudice. So please do consider logging hate crimes, and on the CPS website there is a way to log a hate crime anonymously. If you're not brave enough, if you think I'm feeling really unwell, I cannot do this and take on board the stress myself, you can report it to a third party. They will log it for you, but the only thing, and it will get recorded. The only thing with that is to take it forward. If they think there's a case to answer, the police will need your input. You can only go so far with a third party anonymous report, but it's definitely worth looking into. Please do. I just see this as a way for us to stand up for ourselves instead of just writing a blog as a reaction to, or writing a press release. It's like, hang on, what they've done is a hate crime. So why are we putting up with it, and why aren't we reporting it to the police? No one's saying that we've been stabbed, punched, whatever, but I personally feel like a punch bag at the moment. It's just being hit after hit after hit. But yeah, anyway, so let me know what you think. You might think they're not hate crimes, but in which case, what would your definition of a hate crime be? Because as the CPS said, online and offline, you can't physically punch someone through their computer screen. So anyway, I'm going now, but yeah, please do check out the links that I'm going to attach to this post and let me know what your thoughts are.